colleagues. Good morning, officers and staff. We normally would start with a prayer. Any volunteer for a prayer? Honorable Mtausani? Yeah.
Thank you, Mudula Steve. Arapele, Rara Umadla, Raholebuha, Raholebuhala, Mpawutselo, nailing, Raholebuhala, Tokonala, Mobiso, Murabusuham, Memory Nartana Mutiro, Yukilianwa, Resupakamono, and Horre, Dile Chabayaho, Ratana Leruna, and Amuetri, give us guidance in everything that we are going to be doing for the day. Amen.
Amen. We will start with introductions. My name is Taulo Buipuso Lucas, Member of Parliament for Bobiro and Chairperson of Public Accounts Committee. Honourable members, you can start with yourself. Honourable Mtausani.
Thank you, sir. Dumela Mazadi ki bidua palelo Mtausani, ki Parliament wa Kaulo Atamaka Kumakwane, a member of this committee.
Dumela Mbetsu ki bidua Boniface Mabeo, mo Parliament wa Hamalete.
Yogisem Diwa, Utsabu Titi West, member of this committee.
Dumela Mbetsu, Horetetse Khonerile, Maung East. Madume Lame Victor Polaholo, Kenya West, Member of Parliament and member of this committee. Thank you.
Good morning. Shima Monaching, Member of Parliament, Mlepula South, and member of this committee.
Lee Page, Lesedi, Member of Parliament, Sorowe South, member of this committee.
Thank you very much. The three AGs.
Good morning. I'm Lucy Oemi from Attorney General's Chambers.
Good morning. Kibidua Ndula Mohubona from Ministry of Finance, Office of Accountant General.
Dumela Michelle Zimaziba, Office of the Accountant General.
Good morning. Janet Mahana, Office of the Auditor General.
Morning, Senora Usikeli, Office of the Auditor General.
And my name is Amanda Mulifi, Technical Advisor to the PAC.
Officers, Commander, introduce yourself.
Kialebuha Mudula Steel. Ibira Lieutenant General Placid Tiratsa Soho, Commander Botswana Defence Force.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the esteemed committee. I'm Brigadier Audit Sheriff Samas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Resimulula tuloganya ka ikana kopa commander go ema ka dinao ate a ikane o ka tlhopha Bible kgotsa can use affirmation. If you are using the Bible, there you have the Bible. Munele Bible. Commander?
Check just before an administrative issue.
Error.
Chairperson. Chairperson, some of my officers were requiring the notes. Who got one steal or but it's those notes properly.
You want to steal
Yeah.
Hey.
Thank you, Chair.
Baka bakunte.
Bakunte khanits or but Chair so me traditionally rehiwa the proceedings in the one.
Back I command.
Two.
Baba Bidi.
Yes, sure.
Abatsen Commander Territorial Appeal.
Thank you very much. Rekatswala ka wika.
Erra, katswala ka wika.
Thank you, sir.
Can you help the commander with the? Okay, the Bible is there. Commander Utan Salamarago.
I,
Your name.
Lieutenant General Placid Girazahai Soho,
Swear by Almighty God.
swear by Almighty God
That the evidence I shall give.
that the evidence I shall give
Before this Committee of Parliament.
before this Committee of Parliament
Shall be the truth.
shall be the truth
And nothing else but the truth.
and nothing else but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Finance Controller. Can you help the Finance Controller, sir? Irra, Solazal Bola Muja. And Salamaraho, I
Brigadier Sheriff Samase,
swear by Almighty God.
swear by Almighty God
That the evidence I shall give.
that the evidence I shall give
Before this Committee of Parliament.
before this Committee of Parliament
Shall be the truth.
shall be the truth
And nothing else but the truth.
and nothing else but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank
you, sir.
By way of progressing our proceedings, we shall ask you, Commander, to give us a presentation of your executive summary. Commander.
Ke a leboga modulasetulo le batlotlegi maloko a committee. Chairperson, I assume that the Executive Secretary as presented has been read, but I wish to, if that is the case, then speak more specifically to matters of concern from us at the Defence Force. And essentially the first matter, Chairperson, is what, in our view, is successive low levels of defence spending. Over the years, the defence budget itself has reduced, not just the defence budget, but the budget across government on account of particularly where procurements are done in Thank you, Chairperson. Particularly where procurements are done with foreign currency. The steady depreciation of the pool against foreign denominated currencies has the net effect of reducing budget allocations. Further to that, Chair, we have, since NDP 11, been trying to be very specific around the loss of capital defense capability and the urgent and very serious need to recapacitate the Defence Force in order for it to be able to execute that mandate. And that has not been forthcoming. Consequently, Chairperson, we have serious capability gaps, some because operational threats have changed, but some primarily because we have not kept the same relative combat power throughout the years. So the airlifting of our National Command Authority, so our presidential fleet, is one such capability that is facing challenges. Air mobility in general is one such. Here we're looking at fixed tactical and strategic airlift, and then tactical heliborne operations have also been affected severely. Our air policing, chairperson, is one such, and in particular the multi-role fighter capability is facing severe constraints. Our ground maneuver, and in particular our ground maneuver that represents key, together with air policing, that represents key deterrence capability, particularly for defense forces with a force structure similar to ourselves, and a landmass as big as the landmass that we require to be able to defend, requires a capability of strategic being able to present strategic surprise, and consequently this has been eroded, meaning our deterrent capability is lost. Field fires also constitutes one such capability that we are facing challenges with. Then, Chairperson, dual use capabilities, particularly to enhance civil defense interventions from particularly natural disasters and any other such have been severely compromised. Chairperson, this happens in an era where, if you juxtaposition the emerging threats, it, in our view, cries out to a desperate need and a very urgent need to address some of these capabilities that I've been speaking to. In particular, the emerging multipolar world with a global focus on peer or near-peer rivalries or adversaries is particularly having dynamics within the third world that presents particular risk. In particular, one such risk is the acceptance or the undermining of the principle of territorial boundaries, as particularly enshrined by the then Organization of African Unity, or now the AU, where colonial boundaries have become the boundaries that we accept. We see, particularly with the annexation of territories by those that have the means or have occupied certain pieces of land that would have otherwise belonged to certain countries. Globally, this is now acceptable to become, if you annex a piece of land, it then becomes part of your territory. We see the growing spread, particularly within Africa, to mention Cabo Delgado and Eastern DRC, threat of terror that presents itself particularly in ungoverned spaces. Ungoverned spaces, Chairperson, are exacerbated by a lack of government services, and in particular government security agencies, whether they be public security agencies such as the police or the Defence Force itself. And the Defence Force, in its capacity as, in particular, us aid to civil authority, our inability to support our government agencies presents such a threat, Chairperson. The now seemingly easy access of drone technology, and in particular weaponized drones by terror and rebel groups. These capabilities have, prior to this, being the preserve of state actors, and now increasingly non-state actors have easy access to this. A very clear manifestation of this is the current instability in Sudan, in the Horn of Africa, and some rebel movements within the rest of the Horn of Africa, having technology that was previously accessible only to states, and consequently could deliver the kind of terror that could only be owned and delivered by a state actor. Chairperson, finally, amongst the threats that I wish to mention in particular is cyber. And threats within the cyber domain have increased, not only perpetrated by state actors, but also by non-state actors, and some being non-state actors within, shall I say, groups that I have identified with either an ideology or a grievance of sorts, but some are within the domain of what could be called lone wolves. But this threat, particularly Chairperson, has the distinct capability of having immense damage with catastrophic effects to governments, to civil society, and to businesses and other such private entities. Chairperson, we, with respect, again, going back to low defense spending, if I may bring the example of a country to which Botswana had recently been deployed, one of the key issues there was, in my view, a systemic underspending for that jurisdiction's defense force, stemming out of a advice by Western donor countries then to say, you've obtained peace, you're no longer having a civil war, let then the peace dividend pay rewards, and do not invest in defense capability, but rather invest elsewhere. Now, defense spending, I will always say, Chairperson, is a choice. It's a choice of a particular jurisdiction to determine how much it is that they will spend on their defense. But what is critical around that choice is that once the choice is made, it takes years to re-steer the ship and acquire the defense spending that could be required. So, for example, if we choose to ground our air policing capability, to reconstitute it takes an immense amount of time to train the air crews to be able to fly the platforms that would have been chosen or acquired then. It takes a significant amount of time in reconstituting the doctrinal approach of how these particular platforms, together with the rest of the service capabilities, will marry up to be able to deliver either the deterrent or the inherent repelling capability that a nation wishes to acquire. In particular, when we speak to defense capability, air policing, as a jurisdiction, we have come from an era where, with the then apartheid government, the entire airspace of Botswana from flight level 120, so 3 kilometers above ground level, was owned and controlled by apartheid Pretoria. And I lived through that time, and I know that the South African regime then flew over our territory with impunity. And there was nothing that we could do. No protest, no amount of protest could actually resolve that. It was a constant breach of our national sovereignty, and in particular, a constant breach of our national sovereignty by a government pursuant to a policy to which we as a country were in strong opposition to. Additionally, what it meant is that Botswana's revenue, by controlling that airspace, was now going to a different jurisdiction. And that revenue of civil air traffic overflying our airspace, and then that civil air traffic in some cases coming to land within our airspace, was controlled and authorized by an entity that was not sovereign to ourselves. It is important to raise these, Chairperson, because without attending to these, eventually the Defence Force will just become an employment agency and will not be able to do and provide the mandate as prescribed by the Act. And that would be a travesty in our view. I hope I was clear, Chairperson, with that summary, essentially pleading to your committee as part of Parliament to introspect with respect to defence spending and hopefully understand the dire need to address some capability gaps. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Commander. You've been listening to the Commander. I shall now invite honourable members to engage with the Commander on the executive summary. Honourable members. Honourable Lesedi.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Commander, and your team. I have some few questions. The first one, Commander, is may the BDF give an update on the SADC mission in Mozambique and the financial implications.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Relesedi. I will try my level best. I might not be able to provide specifically issues of finance, the financial update, because I don't have them here with me. But it could be if allowed, the BDF is more than willing to present to this committee those particular finances. Chairperson, in answering the question Honourable Relesedi, the BDF was part of SADC's mission in Mozambique. Initially, the Mozambican government required of member states individually to help them out with the situation in specifically the Cabo Delgado region. That specific problem, Chairperson, had been brewing for a number of years prior to when Mozambique in, I think, 2019 accepted that what was happening there was terrorism rather than just lawlessness. SADC, and in particular the SADC Defense Subcommittee, which is an organ of a sub-organ of the Organ on Politics, Defense and Security, had been saying and urging the Mozambicans to either pronounce it as we saw it from intelligence reports, that it was a terrorist activity. In particular, there were elements of it being a religiously based terror that was happening in Mozambique. But as I say, the government of Mozambique initially required member states to facilitate it as on a bilateral engagement. Botswana spoke very strongly and was supported by the rest of the other SADC members that as SADC we had already created the instruments for which SADC could be able to respond to a contingency such as that. And then trying to replicate them through a manner that is bilateral presented many challenges. Key amongst those was that we would, as individual countries, would not know what the other countries is providing support for. So we might end up with support in one area and a paucity of capabilities in another. Eventually Mozambique agreed, SADC then intervened, and in particular, because we as SADC felt we didn't have the forces to hold and occupy ground, it was agreed that the forces that need to go there were forces where, in military parlance, we would say a rapid deployable capability, meaning that this force would be sufficiently equipped and armed to be able to move swiftly, engage with Al-Suna wa Jamal, dislodge them in certain bases, and thereafter wait for follow-on forces, particularly provided by the host nation, to hold that ground and then release these forces to move further on and engage further capabilities. I will say, Chairperson, that the first 6 months of that engagement, SADC, in my view, and Botswana as a key contributor of forces, made very significant gains. We disrupted completely the logistical capability of Al-Suna wa Jamal. We disrupted the ability to for command and control. We disrupted the ability to recruit and train. We disrupted the ability to raid with impunity the countryside of Cabo Delgado. And all of these ended up with a significant fixing in military terms. In other words, making sure that your adversary is held in one position, fixing Al-Suna wa Jamal in a certain particular area that presented challenges for which SADC at that time was ill-equipped to be able to address. So it was a mountainous and part of Cabo Delgado, also a area with a lot of mangrove swamps, which presented challenges of how it is to uproot Al-Suna Jamal from that territory without the capability that could address it. But what it did present, Chairperson, was a unique situation where there was quite a lot of desertion from Al-Suna Jamal. There was a split in the command of Al-Suna Jamal. And from Botswana, we had also argued that, particularly with the unique situation where Mozambique was, that it could be possible that under that pressure, Mozambique could have offered significant concessions for even more of Al-Suna Jamal personnel to surrender to authorities, and once surrendered to authorities, no further action other than reintegration would take place. So those were the achievements, Chairperson. And as we leave, those achievements remain largely in place. But we were asked by the host nation to leave, and it no longer really mattered what we thought the host nation was capable of, but because they had said to us as region, thank you for the help, and now from now on we will be able to sustain ourselves. We are there. Now we don't really have a lot of visibility in that particular area, other than just intelligence reports stemming from information that you would then keep acquiring. But sometimes, of course, intelligence is, as you all know, members, is an estimation. It is not absolute truth. So that estimation may be correct. It may be slightly correct, or it could be very way off. I hope I've answered you.
Thank you. Justice to the Honorable.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, we are able. Khorana gore ke motho se senta gore di financial uta diramangomano gore this committee ba di avail to this committee. What was the toll death?
Sorry, my mic is off. Commander, please make the financials available to committee secretariat. Thank you very much.
Nike, what was the death toll of the BDF soldiers in Mozambique, and also what the nature of the cause of the death?
Thank you very much.
The death toll, also the cause of the nature of cause of death.
Commander le muitatsebe officers. Akere le rona le riitatsebe ya no sa. Too much movement.
Me Chairperson, hona ba nkiitatsebe in a good way. God hona ka khona go. Hora officer wa ka o sinkile ka speed mo di recording sa gagwe. Ke kopa gore ke re ke le have this information with ke tla ke confirm for its accuracy. Ka gore gongwe something it's out of finance, where something might have happened. And then particularly the reason why I say so is sorry, it could be for some development expenditure in I expand where we are acquiring capability that we need at Mozambique, but we need as a defense force throughout. So it might not be accounted there, or it might be accounted elsewhere. May Chairperson, year 2021, 2022, we are allocated 200 million pula.
How much?
200 million pula.
Okay.
We used 134 million pula under development expenditure. And we had a recurrent budget expenditure of 66 million pula. The year 2022, 2023, we are allocated 150 million pula. And all of that 150 million pula we used as a recurrent expenditure. And then the year 2023, 2024, we were allocated 145 million pula and used that 145 million pula as recurrent expenditure. This makes a total allocation of 495 million pula was the total allocation, and the total recurrent expenditure was 361 million pula, whilst the development expenditure was 134 million pula. But we will, as I say, reconfirm.
Yes, once you have finalized the figures, please make them available to the committee secretary.
Thank you, sir. Ari tetse gape chairperson a re batlela information.
O batla go itewa tsebe gape?
Ke batla ya se gore tle ke kgone go araba.
Okay. Honorable said you are done, right?
No, I'm not saying. Na ni ke re ngware wa araba. Okay, ka tswela ka di sela ntsa a emetseng.
Commander, you are over consulting now. Some of these things you should know. If you don't, then we shall receive further information through our secretaries.
Thank you, Chairperson. Ke batla gore ke go arabe ka bonnete, Chairperson, ke sa ka go sa
I think so. I think we made a mistake by allowing them to come in, because now they are competing for the attention of the commander.
But 60, Chairperson, really said. We've had one contingent member who tlhokagetse, unfortunately, o gatilwe ke koloi. One contingent member who tlhokagetse ka what we call an accidental discharge. Accidental discharge, we pudile accidentally. The other contingent member who bolailwe ke actions of our enemy, so he died in action. And then one contingent member, we bolaile aba bolaba le babedi, so a total of 6.
Abola baruna. Abola
baruna.
Kore at a time go sile 3. Ke ra go no mo incident e.
I ke chance ke le mo ke ipola, sorry, before ke ipola ba ga itse ba ba di e be ke ipola.
Yes, sir. Let me ask the other one. May the BDF give a brief on the recent gender-based violent killings by officers. Maybe you provide an explanation on how the officers managed to get firearms to commit such violence and violent crimes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. We have had a number of, and I have compiled some statistics here, Chairperson, anticipating that this could be a question leveled at us. We've had a number of incidences in which our members have either committed murder, and then suicide. And I have not disaggregated this in terms of the tool with which they committed these acts with. But there's a total of 68 personnel who've committed murder. And then this 68 in ours from the year 2021 through to 2025. 68. Sorry, not 68, 86, sorry, 86, not 68, 86. From 2021 through to 2025. So, for example, 2025, we have a total of 5. One has committed suicide, so that is not exactly gender-based violence. They for whatever circumstances they took.
Commander, let me get you right here. Are you saying from 2021 there were 86 murder suicides or what?
Yes.
86.
A total of 86.
In the past 4 years?
In the past 4 years, yes. Now, statistically, this is 0.0478% of the total Defence Force capability. What we have...
but the number is huge, Commander. I mean, the statistics may be concealing the real seriousness of the problem, but at 86, that is a very worrying situation.
Again, the loss of any life is huge, Chairperson. That I will accept. But I think it's important that we have an understanding of the statistics so that they also guide what resources and interventions are put into place to be able to address that. Because we might address something that really does not require to be addressed in a particular fashion, particularly with paucity of resources. What have we done as the BDF? From way back, the BDF began with...
I don't quite get you there, Commander. What are you saying about the 86? You're saying you relate it to statistics so that you can then determine the interventions. But I wanted you to speak to the number 86 in the 4 years, and I don't quite hear you there.
I was clear, Chairperson, that the number is... I agree with you, the number is big.
Actually, it's massive.
Any person who loses their life in this manner, for us, it's one too many. Yes, and that I will accept. But what I'm trying to say is, from an institutional standpoint, Chairperson, we need to be informed by some computation of what this number actually means.
Just hold on. You know, your officers, as you present, are making some whispers that I think are distracting our attention to yourself. Could you please, officers, desist? We want to listen to you, the Commander.
And it's important to bring it down to, as I say, it's important to bring it down to a statistical understanding or a more detailed study of what really is the problem. Do we need to intervene in this manner, that manner, or the other manner? Otherwise, if we just go by the number and accept that the number is huge, we might put resources where resources actually could be significantly more better used elsewhere. So, for example, if I were to put it to you in terms of the statistical losses that we had, our intervention, go Mozambique, that number is huge too. And as a percentage, even though I haven't calculated it, it could be significantly bigger than this problem. And so how you address it there and how you address it here in Garrison could be significantly different. But what we have done, Chairperson, is we have employed over the years, first of all, we began employing chaplaincy. We introduced the chaplaincy within the BDF. I thought in some cases it could be matters of spiritual engagement that could particularly resolve that particular problem. It's not exclusively problems of the spiritual nature, nor is it exclusive that people who might have challenges this way are seeking spiritual counseling. We've consequently employed quite a significant number of social welfare officers who engage from a non-spiritual standpoint. Additionally, we now have in our employ a number of industrial psychologists who again engage in a number of these engagements. There's quite a significant number of, through those interventions, a significant number of people that I think have been facilitated. And part of those people that have been facilitated, some of whom were probably in the midst of committing what we would have, or what the BDF would have viewed as a penal offense. But because of these interventions and because of our desire to really resolve this problem, that penal offense is overlooked, and our primary desire is to address the imminent threat to either the individual's life or any other life associated with that particular individual. Finally, we've also, under HR, established an office of gender affairs that particularly addresses gender issues and matters that could come out of differences spawning out of interactions of these two genders. One of the key things, and not just exclusively, one of the key things that we've found is problematic is with some men failing to accept that they could have a spouse or a partner who earns significantly more than they do. And this has created issues of inferiority and issues stemming out of that. It's not the one and only. Some are just matters that we believe are exclusively self-centered and have nothing really to do with an inferior complex or any such matter. It will be just matters of outright
Member Kiriana Chairman, ke tsa gore mathata a rona e to go nna nako ke ra ofisara wa tlhalosa sente mo re go utlwa mme go ngwa makere o sentse o le go commander ke kope go itse gore mme gone dithobolotse ba di tsaka tse leng gore ba hella ba go commita this kind of crime se ka tsona.
Two cases that I remember distinctly, Chairperson. One was an officer who ended up killing two people. He accessed the armory despite the protocols to armory, and essentially pulled rank on his subordinate or the armorer on the day, and said to him, he's been assigned a duty that requires of him to draw a weapon, and he was given that weapon. That is a clear breach of our protocols and regulations. And so identified, if not anything, an immediate need for resensitization of our personnel around protocols that Yamari. The other also was taking a weapon for which the particular person was duly authorized because they were on duty, and then absconding with the weapon and then going and committing the offense. Now, that particular problem will be extremely difficult to resolve unless if there's heightened vigilance around the supervision, not just around the supervision, but also around the peer level engagement to see what a colleague doesn't seem to be in good mental health or a mental state, to be able to begin to interrogate or intervene with a desire to counsel. Duties where muscle and need to draw weapons will remain. And if it is not obvious or if signs are not visible that this individual unfortunate incidences like this will happen.
Mr. Chairman,
let's get other people to.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commander. Honorable Monacheng from Lepulole.
Thank you. Yes, from Lepulole South. Commander, may you? Okay, no. Let me start with this one. Which projects within the BDF were overrun, and by how much were they overrun? Also, maybe give an overview of such projects.
The commander is quite very lengthy and elaborate in his responses, so I'm going to ask honorable members to allow me to limit them to 2 questions each, because it's quite very lengthy and elaborate. And when you ask a question, he writes first. That also takes a bit of time.
But now it suggests the opposite of what you are saying, Mr. Chairman.
What are you suggesting?
You are saying we should ask 2 questions and then allow him to elaborate.
Yes.
I think we need just short
Go ahead, sir.
answers.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. The question.
Short questions.
Short question. You got it, I believe. And then can we just get a short answer? So that it is important for us to maximize the opportunity, the time.
Go ahead, sir. Oh,
You mean, Chairman, I could have asked the question. I'll ask 2 more.
A follow-up. Okay. Go ahead, Commander. I got distracted.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honourable Member, the very short answer is that I don't know. I would have to refer back to the detail. I'm happy there's no time span around which you are asking, so it'll be very difficult for me to I can answer in some tsikiditsing, but I will not be able to say kizonetsuk. And so I kupa gore umpena kwa gore ke o batlela karabo ya potso. Thanks.
Earlier on, you talked of foreign airplanes flying our territory. And in particular, you mentioned South Africa. And breaching our government sovereignty what action do we take as a country in those instances?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I won't speak to the tactics, techniques, and procedures of interventions, but the bottom line in a very, very short response is, if you do not have the capability to intervene, you do nothing. If you do not have the capability to intervene, you can do nothing. That violation will happen with impunity, which is predominantly why I was making that plea in the first place.
What are your implications for the management and sustainability of the organization to meet its mandate? Maybe like public funds in the organization, are they used effectively and efficiently to address the challenges of the country according to the mandate of the organization?
I'm not too sure. I'm absolutely certain about the question.
Are you able to meet your mandate? Are the funds used effectively? That's the question.
Thank you, sir. Are we able to meet the mandate? With what I said earlier on, no. We are falling far short of being able to meet our mandate and delivering the defense capability appropriately. So, an example is Mirale Dirahat saying earlier on during the course of this year. Much as the troops were there, but the resources were not there to be able to do the rescues that the troops were very, very eager and pumped up to do. The plans existed, and we improvised as best as we could, but it's important not to improvise every time. When there's a particular piece of platform that could be able to address a particular challenge, because in so doing, you're also making sure that the intervention is as safe as is possible for the troops, even as you send them into harm's way.
So basically, Commander, you are saying you are slowly degenerating into an employment agency, if I may borrow a term. Would you say that?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay.
If we don't address it, we will go there.
Okay.
Yes.
Last one.
Thank you, sir.
It's a bit worrisome that you are not able to really meet your mandate. Are there maybe policies or laws that might be hindering you that you may wish they could be looked into?
No, there are no laws that stop defense spending, to the best of my knowledge. As I said, and in our teaching as we grow within the defense forces, or defense spending is a choice. So, for example, is public health spending? It's a choice. It's a choice of that nation to choose or how much they will fund education, how much they will fund whatever else that is competing with the many aspects that government needs to deliver on. The reality is at a certain point, you'd have paucities. Now, we are not saying we should be given everything, because no country is, even those that we are envious of, they have gaps. They have defense gaps that they cannot fill and will not probably be able to fill.
Let me just interrupt you there. Sometimes you know, go tswa le mo lapeng yana o tla itse gore o thuse ngwana ha o nka gore o itse sa se tlhoka gongwe la kere powers that be a di a tlhaloganya tota your concerns, your needs, your challenges, because as you are rightly saying, how madi a isiwa ko health ile a choice ile gore go itse the challenges of health leadership really itse the challenges that you might be facing which needs funding.
Chairperson, and I'm constrained to answer it in full because it would I would now be speaking to partisan political issues, and so I take and I hope that our engagements with the executive is as explicit as it needs to be understood. I take and I hope that our engagements with Parliament, like today, is as explicit and understood as it needs to be understood. But subsequently, at the end of the day, it is the political direction of the country to which funding is allocated, and whether our argument is sufficiently strong to carry the day or whatever the case might be now, that becomes a partisan political decision, and so unfortunately I can't. I don't want to delve into that space. It's not mine, and shall never be mine.
Thank you very much, Honorable Polaholo.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Good morning, Commander, Lieutenant General. First question, I'm somewhat of a stickler for clarity and would want to know if your organization, the BDF, has a clash with any of the agencies that we have in the country. My follow-up question will come after your answer.
Commander.
Can I answer it this way and say, interagency cooperation is a vital component of government delivering services to its people. The defense mandate is not exclusively the privy of the Defence Force. Defense policy goes hand in hand with foreign policy very, very closely. Defense policy goes hand in hand with public safety policy, environmental policy, etc., etc. Within that preview, any jurisdiction will have professional differences. And have we had professional differences? Yes, we have professional differences with other agencies of our own government. Are those professional differences going to stop us, in my view, from delivering on government mandate? It will be a very unfortunate thing if that were to ever happen, but we have tried and continue to endeavor to make sure that professional differences don't interfere with us being able to deliver government services and capabilities as required by the mandates that we serve.
Thank you very much. You mentioned earlier the issue with the airspace. I'm interested to know who manages that space, who conducts surveillance on that space? Is it yourselves or it is CAAB?
Thank you, Chap. It's a dual functionality. Civil Aviation Authority has the mandate to manage that airspace for civil air traffic movements. Not only do they manage it, they also manage it and present all of the issues around its safe navigation and all of the issues around the collecting of revenues around the use of that airspace. The BDF is responsible for the non-violation of that airspace by either foreign actors or sometimes just lost aircrafts, which are termed stray aircrafts, and that's where we come in. Only in cases of outright war is that airspace transitioned to BDF for its control, and its control normally would be for its use pursuant to the contingency to which is being addressed nationally.
So we can be rest assured that the airspace is now secure under your control. Not any foreign agency.
In law, it is. In law, it is the exclusive control of Civil Aviation Authority. In fact, we control airspace above the Caprivi Strip, which is a decision by the Namibian government to, in the same way that that airspace was controlled previously by the South African government. When they gained independence, they decided that portion they will allow Botswana to continue to control. And to the best of my knowledge, we've never, for example, we have the discipline as BDF not to fly into that airspace because we view it as Namibian airspace, and if we wish to fly into it, even though it's controlled by Botswana, we would follow the due process to apply for the use of that airspace. Consequently, it's a situation that I think has been working well. At any point in time, Namibia may wish to have that airspace under their control.
Okay.
Yes, but policing it is a different matter altogether, Chairperson, which is what I earlier began speaking to, as some of the capabilities that are wanting.
You mentioned a challenge with spending. Would that have any impact in your communication capacity or ability as an army? Are you able to? Do you have in place modern and functional, accurate equipment for communication? Because I know it is a very important, critical aspect of any military in the world.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would really love to answer that question in a classified environment, Chairperson. There I could talk very, very freely and very candidly to yourself. And I humbly request that we put aside that question, either for a situation where we've invited the PAC to a briefing, a classified briefing by ourselves, or a joint sitting of the PAC with our other portfolio committee, and we can speak to those issues very, very candidly.
Yeah,
that's fine.
We shall explore the possibility of that a classified a briefing where we shall not be on camera. We shall
Thank you very much. I think on this one, you should be able to go into the one concerning staff, the staff welfare issue. We know there was public release to that effect that your former, ex-soldiers will be paid after there was some adjustment, recalculation of their pensions and all that. The first question would be, how many officers are affected, both serving and out? And how many have been paid? And those not paid, what could be the delay? And lastly, when should they be expecting their pay?
Thank you, Chairperson. Honourable Member, the BDF Act empowers the Commander with respect to active serving members. And with respect to retirees, the Commander, I am indeed involved, but I am not statutorily empowered for the engagements of the questions that you're asking. However, if the question is around the pensions and pension emoluments to retiring members of the BDF, it is the BDF that has engaged through time, engaged the Defence Council on this particular issue and raised through statistics, Chairperson, shown the Defence Council that members are retiring into poverty, particularly with the advent of the defined contribution scheme, having moved away from the defined benefit scheme, which was deliberately modelled to take care of a short investment horizon and a long residual life post employment by the BDF because of early retirement ages. The model of the defined contribution unfortunately doesn't model that. It was used to model an employee of government that retires at 60 years of service, and consequently it had a long investment horizon and a significantly lesser post-retirement life. What the BDF was able to do with the Defence Council's preceding Defence Councils was, first of all, a very sympathetic view by the Defence Councils that yes, we agree with you, this is a problem, it needs to be addressed. The problem is the costs involved to rectify. Then there were also, through the BDF Act, we re-looked at just retirement ages and increased retirement ages in certain categories by 2 years, which had the net effect of increasing net replacement ratio. In other words, the ratio between your salary post-retirement and your last salary whilst you're still employed. So that ratio, it had a net effect of increasing it by 10%. And in some cases, it was moving people from a 25% net replacement ratio to 35, etc., etc. But it was not enough. And one of the issues that had been put forth was the issue of the denominator. Late last year, government not only having agreed to that, agreed and codified it in law. And so all of those, and gracefully decided to backdate it So all of those who had retired at the point of 1998 were able to have the pension emoluments recomputed with the net replacement ratio of N over 375, which means they earn essentially 20% more. And the reason why that 20% it had existed beforehand was just to take care of the early retirement ages. Now, all of this was administered by our then ministry. And as the BDF, we didn't have a say in the administering of this. And consequently, I cannot be able to say with confidence how many people have been paid, how much those people, the total number of, the total fiscal requirement is, and who is yet to be paid, and why haven't they been paid, or why those who have been paid because as BDF, we, as I said at the earlier on, essentially retirees. The commander doesn't have the purview of in law of retirees, but only active serving members.
But I think, in my view, that's a bit skewed law. Then, if you're only concerned with me for the period that I'm under your command, and things that or money that I was owed during the time I was under your command would not be your concern once I leave the camp. So, in your view, who would be best suited to fully advise on this? Because the members of the public out there, former soldiers, are, in your own words, I mean, they retire in poverty. And what makes it even worse for them is that they had hope of some money coming in, and obviously that has an impact in somebody's mental health. So we need to be guided to who should actually be in a position to give us answers on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Botswana is not unique in having a law such as this. And a key issue around this is to free the commander from anything else that distracts him or her from the mandate of defending the country and responding to those contingencies as we speak. So if we were to address veterans affairs, that's a whole shall I say, ministry on its own. So
that's not what I want you to dwell much on. I need you to go into the future as to address a problem that exists now.
I'm getting to that, and it was just to make sure that you understood why. But I was going to say to you, what actually obtains is that the BDF is involved in personal emoluments of any person who has left and has issues to take up with respect to those personal emoluments, particularly personal emoluments that are due from government. Those that are due from the pension fund, BDF has no say other than to make sure that it's submitted the files and any other documentation that Botswana Public Officers Pension Fund may require. And so those we duly do. And if a retired soldier needs a health issue to be addressed, the BDF will listen, will take him on board, will take him to a medical board to ascertain the extent to which there's a disability, and also find out if that disability is either attributable to us as the BDF, or as the BDF we've aggravated the disability, and consequently it informs compensations, and those the BDF will continue to do. So those we have not shied away from doing, even though, as I say, Veterans Affairs is a different mandate.
Thank you. My last question, still on the issue of welfare. There are some ex-officers or ex-soldiers who had to leave or part ways with the BDF on medical grounds. Some made the option to go on medical grounds. Some were boarded by medical staff. Are these people fully paid? If not, is it also an issue that the commander would not dwell much on because they are no longer serving in the army?
Historically, what we did with people that were boarded by a medical board is that, as I say, the medical board would advise from a medical standpoint whether the suitability of this individual to continue with military training, so the military active military service, and upon that they could recommend a medical discharge, medical separation, or a period of recuperation upon which a fresh board would sit to review and make a recommendation. Those we had paid. But in, I think, 2012, thereabout, we figured as the BDF that quite a significant number of our persons actually retired from the BDF without actually understanding fully their rights. And so we actively sought from retirees from way back that they come, particularly with medical conditions they might believe it is the BDF or is the employee within the BDF that caused those. We have gone through those, a significant portion of those, and assessed them. A significant number of them have been assessed and are now earning disability pay, and that disability pay was backdated to the separation. Sometimes it was the disability pay together with workmen's compensation that was paid. And we believe that that backlog no longer exists. However, retirees retire today in good health. And then 2 years, 3 years down the line, some medical condition emerges. And so we continue to remain available to those retirees to come for medical assessments, and those medical assessments to look at whatever it is that they are complaining about and see the attributability of the government's liability with respect to the BDF Act. And so I will not say that everybody is paid. We paid all those that we know we are due to pay, but we might not have paid some that could be eligible, but they themselves do not know that they are suffering a medical condition that requires payment. But what we do now out of process is that every person who retires goes through a medical assessment, and that a medical assessment hopefully will reveal conditions that might require payment of disability.
Thank you, Commander. I just, because this is a matter of very huge interest out there, the issue of the welfare of ex-servicemen and women. And I want to just clarify one or two things with you. One is that on matters pertaining to ex-servicemen, you may not necessarily be in a space to elaborate on those. And we are going to be hosting the Defense and Justice Ministry now, the Defense and Security Ministry now under State President. So are you saying that the questions we have about the welfare of ex-servicemen, Boneba State President, because is that what you are saying?
No, not exclusively, Chairperson. I've just answered a series of questions by Honorable Polo, which speak to welfare of ex-servicemen, for which the Act requires the BDF to address. What I was speaking to was the issue around pension.
Yes.
And the payment of that pension. Yes. I was saying it was handled by our ministry.
It was handled by
yes.
the then